We have some breaking news. The Toronto Maple Leafs have robbed the NHL. They have made a huge signing on a player that not only were the Leafs excited to get, but that many other teams were in the running for. We're going to break down exactly who that is and discuss what this means going forward, as this is absolutely massive for this team. Stay tuned for all that in this episode, as well as a couple other Leafs updates ahead of tomorrow night's game. But before we get into it, make sure to check us out on Spotify. We're now live on Spotify and everywhere you get your podcast, Apple Music, everywhere. So check it out in the description. The links are down there. There's a ton to go over today. Obviously, the Leafs are we're in the middle of a day off, and we get an absolute bombshell piece of news. And for a lot of fans out there who are unfamiliar with the player we're about to talk about, get ready to hear his name a lot over the next handful of seasons. And especially at a time now where the Toronto Maple Leafs sent out a couple of key prospects at the trade deadline, they have recouped some of those assets, and that is in the form of a guy we spoke about a little bit ago, and that is Luke Hames. They have signed a 2-year contract beginning in the 2025-2026 season. He will join the Marlies for the remainder of this season. Darius, this is an absolutely huge move. We had a whole video on it saying there's a good chance the Leafs signed him. That video aged perfectly, as they ultimately signed him now March 24th. This guy, if you're unfamiliar, and Darius, I'll let you take over here, he is arguably the top prospect that was available out of the college group. A really nice ad. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, he is a center. And they've also, of course, added, who we'll dive into later, we made a video on it earlier, I believe it was last week, on the defense prospect. Now, or the week before, whatever it was, they have a defense prospect, and now they have a center prospect, and arguably the top one on the board.
Yeah, I think he was the top one out of, college, out of the NCAA,
Yeah.
at least. I think the top name, because I think somebody in Brantford would have something to say about that in terms of free agents and the pool and all that. But no, I think he's the top free agent out of the NCAA. And, a lot of teams are starting to sign players out of the NCAA. We saw it yesterday with the New York Rangers, and a couple other teams are starting to do the same. And obviously, a couple weeks ago, we heard rumblings and rumors that it was going to be Luke Hames, that he would be coming to the Leafs, and that they both had mutual interest. And again, I think this is a huge pickup. Like, this is a bigger deal than I think some people are making it, because first of all, this is the most highly sought after free agent out of the NCAA this year. And the Toronto Maple Leafs needed to recoup some assets after this year's trade deadline, especially with what's happening with Scott Laughton right now, right? You traded a first round pick for a guy who's probably going to play on your fourth line in the playoffs. So they needed to recoup some assets, and they did that at the center position. And this is a guy that's not, a name where you're like, all right, he's playing well in the NCAA. Maybe he'll come over to the Marlies and he'll play well, and that's it. Maybe he'll be a fringe NHL guy. This is a guy who should be in the NHL in a couple of years. Like, he should be an everyday NHLer. So it's going to be really exciting to follow his development. And he's on an ATO right now for the rest of the season. So if we want to watch him, we're going to be able to. He's going to be with the Toronto Marlies starting, their next game, essentially. I don't know if he'll get into that game, but he'll definitely play down the stretch here. And his contract only kicks in next season. So pretty cool stuff, I think, for the Leafs to get a free agent like this, especially, Fraser Minten out the door and a couple other prospects out the door. So this was really good for Brad Treliving to kind of recoup some assets too.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of, obviously, before our last video, I did some research into this guy. There's been some videos out there. There's been some articles dropped about how Luke Hames is not only the best NCAA prospect this year, but the best that they've seen, according to some scouts. I believe it was elite prospects, whatever it was, in years. And that's something that you obviously don't hear very often. And specifically for Luke Hames and the Toronto Maple Leafs, it is a great, great move. You can see this here from Joshua Cloak. I know for sure I'm going to be a great NHL player one day. And that's, of course, Luke Hames talking on that, who they met with last week. He has now signed with the Leafs, and you now have him for 2 years. That begins next season. Just absolutely fantastic. If you're unfamiliar with some of his backstory, he was at the Toronto development camp in 2023. He had a breakout year at Dartmouth, and the following year, and then he's continued to be a strong top-line center since. He's 6'1", has 12 goals and 18 points in 22 games, and in very similar fashion to John Tavares, obviously wins a ton of his draws, and he only turns 22 this summer. But at the same time, that's not insanely young as it pertains to these college prospects. Tend to hit the NHL fairly quickly. I mean, we think about Matthew Nyes right now, who is 22 years old, who hit, of course, the NHL at, age 21. And now you have, of course, Luke Hames. I'll ask you the question in a minute as the stats are up. When do you suspect we see Luke Hames available here in, for the Toronto Maple Leafs uniform? I could see it happen as early as next season. Obviously, it's probably not going to happen this season given the playoffs and everything like that, but really good stats this year. 18 points last year in Dartmouth, 36 points in 31 games. Year before, 16 points in 30 games, and he's really started to get better since the 2021 days in the BCHL.
Yeah, and I mean, the year that he came to the Leafs development camp, he's coming off of 16 points in 30 games there, as you can see, right? And he's completely revamped his game, and he's playing really, really well the last couple of years, especially this year. It is very hard to score in college hockey and university hockey. It's not quite like the OHL or the WHL or the Q. It's much harder to put up points, and he's almost a point a game player. So he's putting in really good work. And if you can remember, I mean, he's the same age as Matthew Nyes is right now. And some guys, they take a little bit longer. They're late bloomers, but I don't know if he'll be in the NHL next year. I wonder if he's going to fight for a spot. I do think that he could fight for a spot. I don't know if he'll be a full-time NHLer next year, but these guys sometimes take a little bit longer to develop. And I think that he is going to see NHL time maybe next year as a call-up, because he's going to be with the Toronto Marlies anyway. Like, he's going to go pro, right? Which is going to be nice to see. But I don't think he's that far away, honestly. And he's really good on the draws, like you mentioned too, which is another thing that, a lot of players aren't, right? They're looking, every team is looking for guys who are good on the draws right now. John Tavares is, has been fantastic. You want him in every situation on the draw. So if you can get another guy that can kind of come in and succeed him, because John Tavares is not going to be here forever at this point, right? He is getting older. So if you can get a guy who can come in and be that guy for the team, that'd be fantastic as well. But nonetheless, he's a great player, and he's putting up points this season, obviously wrapped up his season. I'm excited to see what he can do the rest of the way this year with the Toronto Marlies, just kind of see how he, adapts to the pro game. But then next year is going to be the thing for me, where he's going to come into this summer. He's going to work with the Leafs development coaches. He's going to have a whole summer of training. What does he look like next year? And then if he doesn't make the team next year, which could be wishful thinking anyway, he's going to be with the Marlies all year next year. So there's going to be a leap. He's going to take a leap next year. So that's going to be fun to watch. And again, I think that he's going to be a really good player for the Leafs. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm surprised that they got him. Obviously, he looked at the Leafs and he's like, this is a good opportunity for me to work with, a lot of development staff. Obviously, the Leafs have, right? But the fact that they did go out and get him, I think this is fantastic.
Yeah, there was a lot of teams that were in the running for him, the Vancouver Canucks being one of them, and they were able to rob the NHL in the sense of they got their guy and someone that was desperately sought after. You can see here there's a write-up about Luke Hames. Feel free to pause and read the whole thing. He is, he's reliable defensively. He's gritty. I think he'll fit in well, assuming Craig Berube's around for, next year, obviously years beyond that. He's probably not going to make the team at a camp next year, but I think there's a world where he fights for a spot. And obviously they have, Scott Laughton, maybe past Scott Laughton days, maybe past when John Tavares starts to fall down into that 3C, 4C, and, depending how long the next contract is, if he ever goes down to a 4C, will yet to be seen. I'd probably stay with the 3C for the rest of his career. But regardless of that, he is going to be, Luke Hames, a part of this team at some point, assuming he continues that trajectory. And the reason that is even better now is because you look at the outs and ins versus, for the Leafs in this trade deadline, sorry, not versus. Futures out at the deadline. Of course, the picks will leave for now, but again, Minton and Gurbenkin, futures in. They got a 5th, a 6th, and John Prokop and Luke Hames. So they got a defenseman prospect and the top NCAA prospect. They got rid of their second best prospect in Fraser Minton, a middling prospect and 2 first-round picks. So obviously, not necessarily. They still gave up a lot of good guys, but this really helps lighten the load that they actually gave up by getting, according to many, and if you just type in this guy's name on Twitter and in prospect boards, he is at near the top for everyone. You can see here from Nick Richard, Luke Hames was considered among the top free agents. He's a two-way, center who can do damage as a finisher. Fantastic. Significant signing is the word we keep hearing.
And I think this is a good move, honestly, because if you look at what went out this trade deadline, right? You're moving out Fraser Minton, which we know, he was going to play in the NHL. He's going to be an everyday NHLer at some point, maybe even next year for the Boston Bruins, right? But with the Toronto Maple Leafs, obviously you have to trade good players to get good players in this league. And now you have Brandon Carlo, and on top of it, you kept Easton Cowan, who's going to be a great winger, right? And we know he's putting up a lot of points. I hope it translates to the NHL. And now, obviously, you have Luke Hames coming up the middle too. So I think that they did a good job retooling. Is Luke Hames going to be Fraser Minton? I don't know. I think that they're probably different players, right? I don't know if we can compare them one-to-one like that, but I think they did a good job of getting the best available free agent out of the NCAA. He's still a young player. It's not like they went out and got an older player and he signed to too much money or anything like that. He's on an ELC, and I think that he can make a difference for years to come, as he's going to be hungry to make this team, right? And obviously you have Austin Matthews still, you have John Tavares, who's going to take over that second C spot. Is this the guy? I don't know. We'll have to see how he develops and how it translates to pro, but I think this was a good job of retooling, at least on the fly, and recouping some assets. And if it doesn't work out, then they can go out and get somebody else. But in terms of just filling that gap that was left from Fraserman, I think this is a good move. And then on top of it, you have Brandon Carlo for 2 more years. So it's looking pretty good at this point. We knew Brad Treliving had to do something to restock the cupboards a little bit. And this player looks like, by all accounts, like you're saying, if you type his name in on Twitter or any of the prospect boards or anything like that, this is a big get. So I'm excited to see what he can do. But again, let's pump the brakes right away. Let's see what he does with the Marlies the rest of this year. And then let's see how he develops through the summer and then into next year.
Yeah, regarding value, at the very least, they got some guys back to help replenish their prospect system. But that'll wrap it up. Let us know down below if you think it was a steal. At the end of the day, the Leafs get one of the top prospects on the board. Thank you guys for watching.